This is Luis Castro, the author of the Chiastic Word New Testament. Today we will read and comment on the chiastic center of the book of Revelation, chapter 12. On the website chiasticbible.com, you can either download a free PDF version or purchase a printed version by going to amazon.com. In the outline of the book of Revelation, we see chapter 12 at its center, highlighted here in red. Then, when we look at chapter 12 itself, we see that it is also a chiasm with its own center, the center being verses 10 and 11 in red. These verses have a victory theme and are enveloped in a war theme on each side of the center in purple, describing war in heaven and war on earth. They are then followed by a persecution theme in blue. Then the outer portion is in gray and are at the beginning and end of the chapter. These describe a woman who is to give birth to a male child, and at the end, the rest of the woman's offspring is mentioned. In both cases, they are pursued by a dragon. We will now read each paragraph of this chapter and make comments as we go.
Then a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was with child, and cried out in the pain and agony of giving birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven, and hurled them to the earth. Then the dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth.
The sun and the moon mentioned in this passage hark back to the creation story of Genesis. They are referred to as the 2 great lights, the sun to rule the day and the moon to rule the night. The sun itself is the ultimate source of light and life for the earth. Without it, the earth would become a frozen, wandering planet. The sun has been thought of by most religious groups throughout the ages as a symbol for God, if not God himself. He is the source of light and life for all living things on the earth. The sun represents greater power and glory than anything else in creation. The moon, on the other hand, does not generate light on its own, but reflects the light of the sun. The moon is in the image of the sun, in that it too rules the skies, albeit only at night. It is also in the image of the sun in regards to its size. From the Earth's perspective, during a total solar eclipse, the moon perfectly blocks the light of the sun, as you see in this photograph. Of course, in truth, the sun is many more times larger than the moon, but not from the Earth's perspective. Many interpret the moon to represent Jesus, in that Jesus is in the image of God. He is seen to reflect God's glory. He, that is Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. He is the radiance of God's glory and the express image of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. As the moon is declared to be the great light of the night in the creation story, so Jesus is the great light of earth's spiritual night or darkness. Interestingly, Jesus died during the Passover, which is the time of the full moon, when the moon shines its brightest. In this slide, we have Jesus depicted as praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, just before he was arrested by Pilate. The woman clothed with the sun is then seen as God's people throughout the ages, reflecting God's glory, although this sign primarily relates to the Christian era. The moon under her feet then represents God's people upheld by Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life, the source of salvation, the chief cornerstone. As to the crown worn by the woman, it is referred to as a Stephanos in the Greek. A Stephanos is a victory crown. It was worn by those who gained the victory in Greek athletic contests. It was given as a mark of honor and celebration. The other type of crown mentioned in the book of Revelation is a diadem. The diadem represents authority and dominion. This slide shows one worn by King George IV, back in the early 1800s. And here is one worn by Queen Elizabeth II in her early reign. It should be noted that Satan and those with him only wear diadems. They do not wear Stephanus crowns. Thus, while Satan may have power, it is limited power, and ultimately his power will be taken away when he is destroyed. On the other hand, Jesus wears a Stephanus, both a Stephanus and, later on, diadems. In Revelation 14:4, it mentions a Stephanus, and in Revelation 19:12, it speaks of diadems. Then I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. Its rider is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and wages war. His eyes are a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems. The 12 stars is commonly interpreted to mean the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 apostles. It represents God's kingdom and dominion. With regard to the red dragon, the Bible itself identifies it to be the devil and Satan, as we will read in verse 9. In verse 4, it says that Satan swept down a third of the stars of heaven, which we interpret as being the angels who sided with Satan. Thus, heaven lost a third of the angelic host in allegiance to Satan. We will now move on to the next chiastic paragraph.
So that when she gave birth, he might devour her child. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where God had a place prepared for her to be nourished for 1,260 days.
So that when he gave birth, the dragon might devour her child. The woman gave birth to a male child who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. This could only refer to Jesus, his birth, death, resurrection, and ascension, and then to the right hand of the Father. And the woman fled into the wilderness could only be referring to a period of persecution the church was to go through. This period was to last 1,260 days, which according to Adventist interpretation is understood to be 1,260 years, using the day for a year principle. Interestingly, this 1,260-year period must be important to God because it is mentioned 7 times in the Bible in various forms. It is mentioned twice as 42 months, twice as 1,260 days, and 3 times as a time, times, and half a time. Also related to this is a 3.5-day period mentioned in Revelation 11, a discussion for another time. As to the persecution of the woman, this period was one in which the dragon was allowed to wage war against the saints. This period ebbed and flowed for centuries throughout this period. Although death through burning was the common form of execution, many other barbaric forms were used. The historical book, Fox's Book of Martyrs, published in the 16th century, goes into great detail explaining the great persecution experienced up to that point in time. Those who fled and went to live in remote places had a much easier time.
Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. And the dragon fought back, along with his angels. But he did not prevail, and there was no longer any place found for him in heaven. The great dragon was thrown down, the old serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him.
The war between good and evil started in heaven. The dragon is here identified as the old serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. Apparently, the dragon was at one time a good angel who went bad, and who gained a following of other good angels. This war in heaven was between the good angels led by Michael and the evil angels led by Satan. Adventists identify Michael to be the Son of God before he became the Son of Man, the incarnate Jesus.
Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, "Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they loved not their lives even unto death."
We now arrive at the chiastic center of this chapter, which in turn is the chiastic center of the book of Revelation. We can therefore say that this message is the central theme of the book of Revelation. And what is the central theme? Victory. It is victory over the dragon, who is called the devil and Satan. And how do the saints gain this victory? In two ways: by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives even unto death.
Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea! For the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. When the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth,
The battle with the devil is no longer in heaven, but now rages on the earth. And because the devil knows that his time is short, he wages war in great wrath.
he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings like those of a great eagle, so that she could fly away from the presence of the serpent to her place in the wilderness, to be nourished there for a time, times, and half a time.
The eagle's wings must signify the urgency and haste the woman must exert for her own safety, together with the assistance God would provide. The same imagery is used to describe God's dealing with ancient Israel. God said to them through Moses, "You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself." Regarding times, times, and half a time, here the mention of the woman being nourished for a time, and times, and half a time is the exact same wording used in Daniel 7:25. It is a key for understanding this passage, for it is the very same period that is mentioned in Revelation 12:6, the 1,260 days. This shows that a time is 1 year, 360 days, 2 times, 2 years, or 720 days, and half a time, half a year, or 180 days, making it all 1,260 days. And this being symbolic signifies 1,260 literal years, the period of papal supremacy.
Then out of his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river after the woman, to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. So the dragon was angry with the woman, and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus.
At the beginning of this chapter, the dragon swept down a third of the stars of heaven, which is understood to mean a third of the angels before the throne. However, in this passage, the serpent intends to sweep away the woman with a flood that comes out of his mouth. This has been interpreted to mean a flood of lies that is spewed from the serpent's mouth. The intent is to overwhelm the church with false doctrines, is one possible interpretation. But it could also mean to flood the congregation with pagan believers, which is what happened during this period. Not only was there a flood of false teachings introduced during this time period, but when the Christian church was universally accepted by the Roman Empire, when Christianity became the most popular religion to profess, then pagans became Christians in large numbers, and with that they brought their pagan practices, which corrupted the church. But the earth helped the woman. The earth has been interpreted to mean Protestantism in the early stages, starting with the 15th century, which exposed the true character of the papacy and broke the power of superstition which had enslaved the minds of the people. Protestantism extended to the edges of the Roman Empire, to Germany, Holland, England, Norway, and Sweden, to swallow up the flood of pagan fury and rob it of its power to harm the true church. Thus the earth helped the woman. In the latter centuries, the New World, the Americas, was discovered, and Christians had an even greater opportunity to flee the persecution experienced in Europe. The rest of her offspring identifies the final generation of Christian believers, those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. The identifying characteristic of the remnant is twofold: those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. We learn later in Revelation 19:10 that the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Interestingly, the phrase spirit of prophecy is found only once in the entire Bible, so care must be taken when arriving at an interpretation. The position I hold is that the spirit of prophecy is in the context of the verse and of the entire book of Revelation, is that it is referring to a people who have a true understanding of God and of his message in the scriptures. They are living and reflecting the character of Jesus and therefore have the testimony of Jesus. I go more into it in the Notes on Revelation section of my book. Finally, we should note that there is a lot of pairing in this chapter. We have the dragon paired against the woman. It speaks of the woman and the male child. Then at the end, the woman and the rest of her offspring. It speaks of the dragon against the male child, who is then taken up to God and his throne. Then the dragon and his angels fight against Michael and his angels. Then the dragon fights against the rest of the offspring of the woman. We have the pairing of the sun and the moon, the pairing of times, that of the 1,260 days in verse 6, and of time, times, and half a time in verse 12. We have the pairing of war in heaven and then war on earth. Finally, at its chiastic center, we see that there is victory over the dragon by God and his Christ, which is shared by the saints who overcome the dragon by both the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, those who both keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus.